They promised him a pet. What arrived was a terrified alien vampire woman. Elias Ward had lived on the Outer Rim station for nearly 7 years. The station was a cold, angular structure that floated like a silent sentinel in the blackness of space. It was the kind of place that reminded humans how small and fragile they were in the galaxy. The corridors were narrow, the walls metallic and gray, and the artificial lighting hummed softly, never changing, never failing. Elias was used to it. He had built his life around routine, engineering tasks, and quiet solitude. He had no neighbors close enough to visit, no friends to call on, and no family who cared to follow the slow pace of the Rim stations. Life here was simple, structured, and utterly lonely. Loneliness, however, was about to be challenged in the strangest way. Weeks earlier, a message had arrived through the Interstellar Relocation Authority. A program designed to improve morale among frontier engineers was being trialed. It promised something unusual, a pet that was exotic, loyal, and suitable for human companionship. It was marketed as a way to reduce stress and provide company in remote stations. Elias had thought little of it at first. He had spent enough time with machines and data streams to feel comforted by the steady rhythm of their operations. A pet, he told himself, would be unnecessary. Yet, as the delivery window drew near, a sense of curiosity and cautious excitement crept in. The day arrived. A small transport pod, no larger than a shipping container, docked at the station's airlock. Elias followed standard procedures to open it, expecting a small alien creature or perhaps a strange plant that would interact with him in minor, amusing ways. He did not expect what emerged. The pod hissed, and a pale, trembling figure stumbled out. Her skin was almost luminescent, and her hair fell like silver threads around a delicate face. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, a soft amber that pulsed with fear. Small fangs peeked from her slightly parted lips. Her body was covered in light, flexible restraints that glimmered with energy pulses, likely meant to suppress any natural abilities. She collapsed onto the floor, shaking violently. Elias froze. The program had promised a pet. He had expected an animal, he had not expected this. "Are you alive?" he asked cautiously. The figure flinched, shrinking back as if his voice carried danger. She did not speak immediately, only curling into herself, trembling. The translation interface on her restraints flickered and buzzed before producing a hesitant, broken response. "Do not harm." Elias immediately felt a chill. These were words he had not anticipated from a creature meant to be a companion. She was clearly sentient. She understood fear and could communicate, even if imperfectly. He knelt a safe distance away. "I won't hurt you. I'm Elias, you're safe here." She looked at him, eyes wide as if searching for deceit. He could almost feel the memories of abuse and captivity pressing against her mind, making her mistrust him before she even knew him. The station AI, sensing his hesitation, issued a warning. Subject classification: Nocturne, biological life form rated level Alpha. Program protocols indicate retrieval is mandatory. Refusal may result in termination of transport subject. Elias scowled. Termination. The word sounded final, cruel, and entirely wrong. The AI continued. Compliance required. Subject not authorized for unsupervised release without approved human custodian consent. Elias shook his head. "She's not an object. She's a person. She's alive." The restraints hissed softly, their energy pulses dimming as he reached out and deactivated the containment field. The alien woman did not move immediately, but her trembling slowed. For a long moment, they simply observed one another. He noted the way her eyes flicked to his hands, then to his face, measuring, trying to guess intent. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "Humans cruel, most cruel," Elias sighed. He had expected shock, fear, maybe even aggression, but despair. That was heavier than anything he had imagined. "Not all humans," he said softly. "I'm not cruel. I won't let anyone hurt you." The alien woman's gaze lingered on him for a long time. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she relaxed, leaning slightly forward on trembling arms. Her fangs retracted, but the fear in her eyes remained. He guided her to a small observation chamber where she could rest. The chamber had a bed, temperature controls, and a simple feeding system. He activated the system, offering food synthesized to match the nutritional needs indicated in the pod's documentation. She hesitated, then finally touched the food, her movements careful and cautious. She tasted it, blinked, and then retreated into the corner of the chamber, still trembling. Elias watched quietly, not pushing, not speaking, only waiting. He realized that trust could not be demanded, it had to be earned. Hours passed. The station hummed, lights flickering slightly, the gentle vibrations of life support systems like a heartbeat. She did not sleep. She did not speak further. She only watched him and he watched her. When the first shift change arrived for him, he remained alone with her. Loneliness had prepared him for this moment, and yet the reality was overwhelming. He thought about the promise of a pet, the lonely years, the vast emptiness of space. None of it mattered. What mattered was that a life, fragile and scared, had been delivered to him, not as a toy, not as an object, but as a sentient being whose fate rested in his hands. He activated the pod's logs, reading every note about the nocturne species. They were labeled as vampires, though the information was thin and biased. The logs described energy absorption as a feeding mechanism, but emphasized aggressive traits that justified their classification as pet-compatible species. Elias frowned. What he saw did not match the description. The alien woman, Vieria, as he later learned from her broken introductions, was terrified, not predatory. She was desperate, not dangerous. Night arrived in the station, though it was only an artificial cycle of lighting. Vieria curled herself into a tighter ball and whispered, "I am not your toy." Elias nodded, respecting her words. "I never thought you were. You're free here. No one can take that away." Her glowing eyes dimmed slightly. Trust, he knew, would come slowly. She had been conditioned to fear, not to hope. Yet there was a subtle shift in her posture, a signal that she had heard him and perhaps believed him, if only for a moment. Days passed in similar fashion. Elias repaired systems, conducted maintenance, and occasionally shared simple meals with her. She would observe, speak a few words, and retreat. He discovered small details. Her skin was sensitive to light, her hair reacted to touch, and she was capable of rapid, precise movements, though she never used them against him. Each detail confirmed his suspicion. The Nocturne were highly intelligent, yet misrepresented and feared by the galaxy. One day, as he checked the station's external sensors, an incoming communication from the Relocation Authority flashed across his console. "Confirm delivery acceptance," the message demanded. Elias typed carefully. "Subject is safe. She is not a pet. I refuse to return her." The reply was swift. "Noncompliance noted. Compliance is mandatory. Human custodian, you will face consequences if protocol is not followed." Elias stared at the message. Consequences. The galaxy often treated morality as a weakness, but he could not see harming this creature as anything other than betrayal. His life had been quiet and lonely, yes, but he could not allow fear and bureaucracy to dictate the life of another being. Vieria, watching him from across the room, tilted her head slightly. Her voice was soft, uncertain. "Why protect me?" Elias thought for a moment. "Because no one should live in fear for who they are, because freedom is worth the risk." A small, almost imperceptible shift occurred in her expression. Curiosity, a spark of hope, trust, he realized, was beginning to root itself, tiny but resilient. That night he left the lights dimmed, allowing her to rest in partial darkness. He monitored the station quietly, ensuring that no one could breach the systems and that she could feel safe. For the first time in years, Elias did not feel lonely. The presence of another life, fragile and unknown, brought a complexity and energy that machines could never provide. Elias understood, as he watched Vieria finally close her glowing eyes and drift into an uneasy sleep, that his life had changed irrevocably. What had arrived as a promised pet was far more profound than he could have imagined. It was a sentient being, scared and fragile, whose trust would take time and patience. And in a galaxy that often valued power over compassion, Elias had chosen a different path. He had chosen humanity, not cruelty. As the station drifted in silent orbit, far from the reach of most humans and even farther from the oppressive eyes of galactic authorities, Elias made a quiet vow. He would protect her. He would earn her trust. And perhaps, in the process, he would learn something about himself and the strength of human character in a universe that often underestimated it. Days passed slowly on the station, yet Elias felt the weight of life in a way he had not experienced for years. Vieria remained wary, but the initial terror that had gripped her began to loosen, just slightly. She would watch him repair machinery or calibrate sensors, her amber eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, following every movement with a mixture of fear and fascination. She had never seen humans act without malice, without selfish intent. Elias, however, moved with calm precision, a patience she had never encountered. He tried to communicate with her, using the pod's translation system and simple phrases. Each attempt was met with cautious silence at first, then broken words. Slowly she began to respond, often repeating his words or attempting to describe her feelings. "Fear, heavy," she whispered one morning. "Trust, fragile." Elias nodded, understanding her in ways that did not require perfect translation. "Trust takes time. You don't have to believe me all at once. You just have to see that I won't hurt you." Vieria's fangs flashed briefly as she murmured something he could barely interpret. "Humans, why?" Elias shrugged, his shoulders tense. "Why what? Not cruel, not like others." Her voice quivered. "All others cruel." He realized she had lived a long life before this pod, a life filled with fear, exploitation, and perhaps even violence. The Nocturne had been misrepresented as monsters, enslaved, and traded like objects. Her species, reputation had been twisted to justify oppression. And yet, here she was, in the hands of a human who had never intended harm. "I don't know why some humans are cruel," he admitted. "But I know what I can do. I can protect you. You are not alone anymore." Vieria blinked, a slow, almost hesitant movement. She did not move closer, but the rigid curl of her body eased just a fraction. Elias considered that progress. He also noticed something else. Her physical abilities were extraordinary. When she had first arrived restrained, she had been unable to move freely. Now, in small bursts of careful motion, she could leap, stretch, and move with precision beyond any human. It was clear that the Nocturne were biologically exceptional, but she did not display aggression. She simply existed, cautious and observant, as if measuring every step before taking it. One morning, the station AI interrupted their quiet routine. Incoming transmission. Galactic inspectors requesting station access. Immediate compliance required. Elias felt a tightness in his chest. He had known this day might come, but the speed of it unsettled him. The inspectors were representatives of the Interstellar Relocation Authority, tasked with ensuring that all pet transfers complied with regulations. Normally, their presence was a formality, an inspection and signature. Today, it carried a heavier weight. He could sense the judgment that would come, the rigid enforcement of rules that had never accounted for morality or compassion. "They will see her as property," Elias muttered. "They won't see her as what she is." Vieria tilted her head slightly, following the tension in his voice. "Property? Yes," he said softly. "That's how they expect to treat you, but you are not property. You are alive. You are free here." When the inspectors arrived, they did not hide their disapproval. The docking bay lights flickered as their vessel latched onto the station. Two humanoid figures in formal uniforms entered the observation chamber. Their suits were angular, decorated with insignias Elias did not recognize, and their eyes held the same cold efficiency he had come to expect from bureaucrats. Elias stepped forward. "This subject is not a pet. She is sentient. She is under my protection." The lead inspector's eyes narrowed. "You are required to present the Nocturne as a domesticated companion. Noncompliance is not permitted under Galactic Transfer Code 914.2. Vairia shrank back instinctively, curling tighter in the corner of the chamber. Elias noticed her trembling and knew she expected punishment or restraint. She had survived countless abuses before this moment. He drew a deep breath, standing firm. "She is not an animal. She is not a pet. She is a living being. I will not present her as anything else." The inspector's tone sharpened. "Human law is irrelevant. Galactic authority takes precedence. You risk your station and your life by refusing to comply." Elias met the gaze steadily. "If protecting her is a risk, then so be it. I will not hand her over." The inspectors exchanged a brief, incredulous glance. "Such defiance is unusual among humans," one muttered, almost as if surprised by the concept. Elias realized they were used to obedience enforced by fear. They did not understand that humans sometimes acted through principle rather than power. He felt a quiet surge of pride in the species he had always felt alone representing. For hours, the inspectors argued, citing laws, procedures, and penalties. Elias countered each point with logic, ethics, and the obscure human legal references he had managed to research in preparation. Vairia remained in the corner, observing, her fear slowly giving way to cautious curiosity. She had expected brutality, and instead she saw resistance, not to protect property or wealth but to protect life itself. During the debate, she finally spoke more clearly, her voice trembling but audible. "Why care so much?" Elias walked closer, careful to show no threat. "Because no one should live in fear, because freedom is more important than rules that are unjust." Her amber eyes widened. "Freedom, humans strain." "Yes," he said, "sometimes humans are strange, but not all, and sometimes we do what others cannot or will not. That is what makes us human." The inspectors exchanged another glance. One muttered, "This species, unpredictable." It was true. Humanity had a reputation across the galaxy for weakness in comparison to militaristic empires. But here, Elias demonstrated that humans could act in ways stronger than mere force, through moral courage, endurance, and the refusal to yield. He realized that Vairia was witnessing a fundamental aspect of humanity that few outsiders ever saw. As the day wore on, tension in the chamber eased slightly. The inspectors, frustrated by their inability to enforce compliance, sent a warning that more enforcement could follow if Elias did not relent. He ignored it, focusing on Vairia, who now dared to sit up, still wary but no longer cowering completely. He brought her small meals, spoke softly, and maintained calm. "You are safe. No one will take you from here without your choice," he said. Her response was slow. "Choice, humans, strange." "Yes," he said with a quiet smile. "We value choice. We make mistakes, but we also have the capacity to do what is right, even when it is dangerous or inconvenient." Vairia's eyes glowed faintly brighter, a subtle reflection of her curiosity. She had never experienced such deliberate kindness, such steady care. Most of her life had been survival and fear. Here, she saw a species that could be powerful without cruelty, intelligent without oppression. Over the next few days, Elias worked tirelessly to reinforce the station's security. He wanted to ensure that any attempt to remove Vairia would be thwarted. Every system, every sensor, every barrier was inspected and fortified. He knew that the inspectors could return with armed personnel, or that other agencies might intervene. Yet, he felt no fear for himself. His concern was entirely for her. Vairia, meanwhile, began to explore the chamber in short bursts. She discovered the station's temperature controls, the artificial gravity adjustments, and even the observation screens showing the expanse of space. Her curiosity grew as she realized that humans had built and maintained such complex systems not for dominance, but for survival and improvement of life. One evening, as the station lights dimmed to simulate night, Vairia approached Elias cautiously. She extended a hand, small and delicate, and touched the console beside him. Humans capable, strange, good. Yes, Elias said gently, we are capable of good. Sometimes we fail, but we also succeed. That is what matters. That is what defines us. She did not retreat immediately. Instead, she lingered, studying him, observing the steadiness in his movements, the patience in his voice. For the first time since her arrival, she allowed herself to believe, even slightly, that not all humans were cruel. That night she rested closer to him, not touching but no longer fully curled in fear. Elias, watching over her, understood that trust was a fragile thing, yet it had begun to take root. In the darkest and coldest reaches of space, two beings from vastly different worlds had begun a tentative bond, fragile but alive. Elias knew the inspectors might return, stronger and more determined. But he also knew that Vairia had seen a human act with courage and integrity. She had seen a species capable of kindness and protection, even when it was inconvenient or risky. The galaxy had underestimated humans for centuries, seeing only their weaknesses or naivety. But here, in this small, remote station, humanity had revealed a different truth. That strength was not only in power, but in choice, in principle, and in the courage to do what is right. As Vairia drifted into a restless, uneasy sleep, Elias allowed himself a small sense of hope. This was only the beginning. The galaxy would challenge them, the inspectors would return, and the universe would continue to misunderstand. Yet here now, he had begun to change her perception, and perhaps, in doing so, change a small corner of the universe's perception of humans. And Vairia, the terrified alien vampire woman who had arrived expecting cruelty, now faced something she had never encountered before. A human willing to defy the galaxy itself to protect her freedom. Days blurred together in the quiet hum of the station, but Elias knew the peace was temporary. The inspectors had left warnings that they might return with military enforcement if he continued to refuse compliance. He understood the risk, yet the decision had never wavered in his mind. Vairia's freedom mattered more than bureaucracy, regulations, or even his own safety. Vairia, meanwhile, continued to adjust to life aboard the station. She explored cautiously, often glancing over her shoulder, still wary of sudden threats. Yet she also observed Elias with growing curiosity. She had never met a human who acted from principle rather than fear, greed, or instinct. Every gesture he made, every word he spoke, was deliberate, kind, and steady. For the first time in what felt like centuries, she sensed safety. One morning, as Elias conducted maintenance on the station's external sensors, Vairia approached him. She had been practicing the pronunciation of human words, her broken speech improving with each attempt. "Elias, why care for me?" she asked softly, almost hesitantly. He paused, wiping sweat from his forehead, and smiled faintly. "Because no one deserves to live in fear for simply existing, and because freedom is worth defending." She studied him, amber eyes wide, flickering with confusion and admiration. "Humans strange, powerful, not cruel," Elias nodded. "Sometimes humans are strange, but not all. And sometimes we do what is right even when it is risky or difficult. That is our strength." Vairia tilted her head, absorbing his words. "Strength, not weapons." "Strength is not only in weapons," Elias said quietly. "It is in courage, in patience, in the choices we make. Sometimes choosing what is right is far harder than choosing what is easy." She remained silent for a long while, contemplating the concept. Elias could sense that she was beginning to understand a truth she had never considered. Humans could be powerful without being cruel, intelligent without exploiting, and determined without oppressing. The calm did not last. Hours later, the station's communication array buzzed with an incoming transmission. The inspectors were returning. This time, their message was blunt. Human custodian compliance is now mandatory. Failure will result in immediate enforcement measures. Prepare for boarding. The subject is to be delivered as property. Elias felt a chill, but he did not hesitate. He had anticipated this. They will come, he murmured to Vairia, and we will show them who humans really are. Vairia looked at him, eyes wide, and asked, "Humans fight for truth." "Yes," he said. "We fight for freedom, for what is right, not just for ourselves, but for others who cannot fight for themselves." When the inspectors arrived, they were accompanied by two security officers equipped with standard restraint devices. They expected compliance, not defiance. Elias greeted them calmly. "This subject is not property. She is free and under my protection." The lead inspector sneered. "You misunderstand the law, human. Galactic authority requires you to present the Nocturne as a domesticated companion. Noncompliance will be met with enforcement." Elias' eyes met theirs steadily. "You can enforce rules, yes, but that does not make them just. I will not hand her over. She is not yours and she never will be." The inspectors exchanged exasperated glances. "Your logic is irrelevant. You are risking the station and your life." Elias took a slow breath. "Perhaps, but some things are worth the risk. Freedom is one of them." The security officers stepped forward, but Elias did not move away. Instead, he activated the station's defensive protocols, not weapons of destruction, but security measures designed to protect and isolate. Doors sealed automatically, surveillance systems engaged, and sensor arrays monitored every movement outside the chamber. The inspectors could see that any attempt to remove Vairia without consent would trigger immediate alerts. Vairia watched in awe. She had never witnessed humans act with such precision, intelligence, and courage without resorting to violence. It was unfamiliar, almost unbelievable. The lead inspector frowned. "You are defying authority. This is highly irregular." Elias shook his head. "Authority is not the same as justice. You enforce rules designed to suppress, to control, to dominate. I enforce what is right. There is a difference." Vairia, gathering courage, moved slightly closer to Elias. "Humans strange, strong, different." "Yes," he said softly. "We are capable of great harm, yes, but also of great good. That is why freedom is important, so choices can be made and so lives can be protected." Hours passed in tense standoff. The inspectors attempted to persuade, to intimidate, to manipulate Elias into compliance, but he remained unyielding. All the while, Vairia observed, learning not only the language but the philosophy, the moral resilience, and the determination of humans. She began to see that her fear had been based not solely on past experiences, but on assumptions about this species. Humans, she realized, were unpredictable, but sometimes unpredictably courageous in ways she had never imagined. As the standoff continued, Elias communicated with Earth through long-range channels, sending detailed reports, legal arguments, and evidence about the sentience of Nocturne. The communication system crackled with resistance, but he persisted, knowing that human law, if invoked correctly, might create leverage. Vairia, now standing a few feet away from him, murmured, "Humans' clever use, words like weapon." "Yes," Elias said with a quiet smile. "Sometimes words can be more powerful than weapons. Truth and courage can change minds, even when power cannot." By evening, the inspector's patience was thinning. They realized that this human was not easily intimidated. They had expected fear, obedience, or bargaining. Instead, they faced calm defiance backed by logic, careful preparation, and unshakable principle. Vairia's trust in Elias grew as she observed this. Her trembling eased, and her glowing eyes reflected more curiosity than fear. She began to mimic simple human actions, gestures, breathing patterns, cautious smiles, testing the boundaries of trust. "Elias," she asked, her voice quieter, more confident, "you not afraid?" "I am aware of the risk," he admitted, "but fear does not always dictate action. Sometimes doing what is right means standing firm, even when it is dangerous." Her amber eyes widened. "Humans' strange power inside." "Yes," he said, "we are capable of strength in ways that are not always visible. Courage, principle, and intelligence, these are weapons that few expect, but they are powerful." As the night cycle approached, the inspectors finally withdrew, frustrated but unwilling to escalate further without higher authorization. Elias knew they would return eventually, but for now the station was secure. Vieira, standing by his side, looked at him with a mixture of relief and awe. "You, humans, not cruel," she whispered. "Not all," he replied. "Some of us try to do right. Some of us refuse to follow the easy path. That is what makes humans human." Vieira's expression softened. She had expected captivity, pain, or exploitation. Instead, she saw patience, protection, and moral courage. She had never understood that such strength could exist without force, without domination, without fear. The next days were quieter, though vigilance never relaxed. Elias and Vieira developed a routine. He repaired systems, monitored communications, and maintained security. She observed, learned, and slowly began to trust him more. Their interactions became less about fear and more about curiosity, exploration, and tentative friendship. Elias taught her how to use the station's systems in safe ways, how to monitor sensors, how to operate environmental controls, and even how to prepare simple sustenance. Vieira learned quickly, her intelligence evident in every calculated movement and thoughtful question. "You humans complex," she remarked one evening. "Use, logic, care, not harm." "Yes," Elias said, "we are complex. We have flaws, but we also have the capacity for remarkable good. That is why freedom matters, to make the choice between harm and care, fear and courage, cruelty and compassion." For the first time, Vieira allowed herself a small smile. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it carried meaning. She had begun to understand humanity in a way few of her people ever had. Elias felt a quiet pride, not only in his own choices but in the species he represented. Across the galaxy, humans were often underestimated, considered weak or foolish. Yet here in this remote station, human ingenuity, morality, and determination had protected a life, challenged authority, and shown that power was not always physical. It could be moral, intellectual, and courageous. Vieira's presence transformed the station. The quiet hum of machinery was now accompanied by a fragile but growing connection. Two beings from different worlds, separated by species, history, and expectation, had begun a bond based on respect, trust, and shared courage. The galaxy might not yet understand. Inspectors might return, stronger and more determined. Rules and authority might continue to clash with morality. But for now, Elias and Vieira had forged a small victory, a proof that humans could stand firm, protect the vulnerable, and act with principle even against impossible odds. And Vieira, who had arrived expecting cruelty, now saw a species capable of protecting, nurturing, and standing unyielding for what is right. In the stillness of the station, as lights dimmed and shadows stretched across the metallic floors, both of them understood that their journey had only begun. The galaxy was watching, waiting, and perhaps underestimating them. But humans, Elias knew, had a way of surprising the universe when it mattered most. The galaxy had underestimated humans for centuries. It considered them fragile, short-lived, and unprepared to face the broader complexities of interstellar politics. Elias Ward, alone on a small station at the edge of known space, knew better. Humans were unpredictable. Humans were clever. Humans had a strange combination of courage, persistence, and ingenuity that few species could comprehend, and Elias was about to demonstrate it. Vieira watched him carefully, her amber eyes reflecting both curiosity and awe. She had seen humans act in principle before, refusing to obey authority even when threatened. But now, Elias had gone further. He had contacted Human Command directly, sending detailed reports of her status, her intelligence, and the injustice of her treatment under the Relocation Authority. Every word was deliberate, carefully phrased, and strategically aimed at creating leverage. "Humans clever," she whispered one evening, her voice trembling with fascination. "Not fight with weapons, words strong." Elias smiled faintly. "Sometimes words can be stronger than any weapon. Evidence, logic, courage, they can protect lives even when no physical power exists." The next day, a small fleet appeared on long-range sensors. Elias' heart did not race, though his mind worked quickly. These were not hostile vessels, they carried no weapons. Instead, they were human response teams, envoys, legal specialists, historians, and advisors. Their orders were clear. They were here to intervene not with force, but with proof, reason, and strategic pressure. Vieira tilted her head, clearly struggling to understand. "Humans send not fighters." "No," Elias said. "We send minds, knowledge, law, evidence. Sometimes the strongest attack is simply showing the truth." The inspectors had returned to the station in the meantime, unaware of the human fleet approaching. They expected compliance, or at least intimidation. They had not anticipated that the humans who had delivered her might fight not with weapons, but with intellect and organization. Elias guided Vieira to the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the reinforced windows, the station a fragile outpost against the void. "Watch," he said quietly. "This is what humans can do when rules are broken, when injustice is at stake. Sometimes we surprise the galaxy." Through the communication array, Elias began to present the evidence. Records of Nocturne intelligence, culture, and history were transmitted to higher galactic authorities. Data on centuries of enslavement, misrepresentation, and oppression were detailed meticulously. Charts, videos, and testimonies accompanied the evidence. He explained the legal implications, emphasizing that human law recognized sentience, freedom, and rights that could not be overridden by bureaucratic claims. Vieira's amber eyes widened as she followed each step. "Humans' strange use rules like shield." "Yes," Elias said, "rules can protect when used wisely. They can stop injustice when applied correctly, and humans, we learn how to use them." Hours passed. The inspectors attempted to argue, threaten, and manipulate, but the humans in orbit responded with calm precision. They cited interstellar trade regulations, intergalactic ethical conventions, and centuries of human legal precedent. The inspectors' authority faltered. The galaxy was watching now, and humans were presenting a narrative of fairness, intelligence, and principle that was difficult to dismiss. Vieira could not hide her amazement. She had lived under oppression and fear for centuries. The idea that a species could challenge authority not through weapons, but through knowledge, moral courage, and persistence was astonishing. Elias guided her carefully through each step of the process. He explained the logic of human decisions, the importance of documentation, and the power of collective action. "You see," he said softly, "humans are not always the strongest in battle, but we are patient, persistent, and clever. That is why we survive, and why we can protect others who cannot protect themselves." The inspectors began to lose composure. Their threats became hollow. Their orders, once absolute, now seemed empty. The humans in orbit had demonstrated a unity and resourcefulness that few galactic authorities had ever encountered. They were willing to disrupt trade, withdraw from alliances, and expose corruption rather than violate principle. Vieira's trust in Elias solidified. She could now see clearly that this human was not just brave in the moment, but part of a species that could act with remarkable foresight and integrity. Humans, Not cruel, protect. Strong, different, she whispered. Yes, Elias said, placing a reassuring hand near hers, careful not to frighten her. We are capable of kindness even when it is inconvenient. We are capable of courage even when fear surrounds us. And sometimes we act not for ourselves but for what is right. As negotiations continued, the inspector's allies began to question the wisdom of escalation. They realized that the humans were not bluffing. They had legal, ethical, and strategic leverage. They had demonstrated intelligence and foresight that could outmaneuver military might. Slowly the inspector's confidence waned. Vairia stepped closer to Elias, observing the exchange. Humans teach patience, not fight first. Yes, Elias said. We choose when to act and how to act. Force is not always the answer. Sometimes persistence, reason, and courage achieve what weapons cannot. By the next cycle, the inspectors conceded. They could no longer present Vairia as property. The evidence, logic, and moral authority of humanity had forced a recognition that she was sentient, autonomous, and protected under human law. The galaxy, accustomed to dominance through fear and violence, had underestimated humans once again. Vairia's relief was evident. She moved freely now, no longer cowering, no longer retreating. The glow in her eyes was no longer fear but wonder. She had seen the unexpected, humans acting with courage, patience, and intelligence, defending life rather than exploiting it. You humans different, she said softly, not like others, protect, choose, care. Yes, Elias said, that is who we are, not perfect but capable of extraordinary good when we decide it matters. Freedom, respect, and trust, these are weapons we use better than most species understand. The galaxy would remember this. Not as a battle fought with lasers and bombs, but as a moment when humanity demonstrated that intelligence, principle, and courage could triumph over expectation, fear, and oppression. Vairia understood now that humans were a force unlike any other, unpredictable, resilient, and morally formidable. In the quiet that followed the inspector's retreat, Elias and Vairia sat together in the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the windows, a reminder of both the vastness of space and the small victories that could ripple through it. You humans powerful, not weapon inside, Vairia said, her voice tinged with awe. Yes, Elias replied. The most powerful weapon is the courage to do what is right, even when it is risky. The ability to protect life, to respect freedom, and to stand firm when the world demands obedience. That is strength humans have in ways few understand. Vairia smiled faintly, a small, genuine gesture. Elias, trust, fragile grow humans. Trust grows slowly, he said. It is earned, respected, and never taken for granted. You have earned my trust, and I hope in time you will fully trust humans as a species. The bond between them, forged in fear, patience, and moral courage, had solidified. They were no longer simply custodian and rescued. They were allies, learning from each other, growing together. Elias understood now that humanity's greatest strength lay not in dominance, but in the capacity to act morally, intelligently, and courageously, even when alone, even when underestimated. Vairia, who had arrived expecting cruelty and exploitation, now understood something entirely new. Humans could be defenders, protectors, and liberators. They could challenge authority with reason, shield the weak with patience, and inspire trust in the most unlikely of allies. As the station drifted silently through the void, Elias prepared for the next phase. Galactic authorities would take time to respond, but the first step had been made. Vairia's freedom was secure, her trust earned, and humanity had demonstrated its unique power, the ability to act wisely, bravely, and morally when the universe least expected it. And Vairia, once a terrified alien vampire woman, now stood as living proof of the strength of human character. She had learned that courage, intelligence, and compassion could change fate, defy expectation, and protect life in ways that no weapon or authority ever could. The galaxy would watch eventually. But for now, humanity had won in the quietest, most extraordinary way possible, by choosing to act rightly, to defend the weak, and to reveal a truth the universe had long underestimated. In the dim light of the observation deck, Elias glanced at Viria. "The universe will try to challenge us again," he said. "But now you know humans in a way few have, and we will face whatever comes together." Viria's glowing eyes met his, filled with understanding and cautious optimism. Together, humans, strong, care, different. And in that moment, a new chapter began, for Elias, for Viria, and for humanity's reputation in a galaxy that had always misjudged it. The galaxy had learned one undeniable truth. Humans were not to be underestimated. The galaxy was watching. Messages from the outer sectors had reached hundreds of systems, describing the events at Elias Ward Station. A human had refused to present a nocturne as property, had challenged inspectors, and had protected a sentient being against bureaucratic authority. For many, it was incomprehensible. Humans were widely regarded as weak, reactive, and easily dominated. Yet here was evidence that they were capable of courage, intelligence, and moral principle far beyond what any interstellar authority had expected. Viria, now fully awake to her surroundings, observed the calm determination in Elias every day. She had seen what humans could do: defend life, wield reason, and inspire change without resorting to aggression. In a galaxy accustomed to force and intimidation, this was a revelation. "You, humans, change, galaxy?" she asked one evening, her voice soft and uncertain. "Yes," Elias said. "Humans are not the strongest in battle, but we have other strengths. We act wisely, patiently, and with courage. And when we protect what is right, the galaxy cannot ignore us." Viria nodded slowly, absorbing the concept. She had always assumed that power came from domination, control, or fear. Now she saw that true strength could lie in patience, principle, and the ability to act morally even under pressure. The station was quiet for the first time in days. The inspectors had returned to their authority to report failure. Elias' transmission to human command had ensured that no further attempts could be made without escalating to high-level negotiations. And humans, he knew, were careful strategists. They would not overreach, but they would not back down either. Viria began to move more freely now, exploring the station with confidence. Her amber eyes glowed with curiosity, her movements precise and controlled. She had begun to trust Elias completely, understanding that he posed no threat and that humans could act as protectors rather than oppressors. One day, Elias activated the station's observation deck to show her something he had arranged. Across the void of space, small human vessels were arriving, not as an attack, but as emissaries, advisors, and allies. They had come to demonstrate human commitment to justice, using legal, historical, and ethical evidence to enforce the recognition of nocturne freedom. The galaxy was learning that humans could influence events through knowledge, principle, and moral courage, rather than raw power alone. Viria's voice trembled slightly. "Humans allies, strong, not weapons." "Yes," Elias said, "strength can take many forms. Sometimes it is seen in force, sometimes in law, and sometimes in the courage to do what is right even when the world disagrees." As the human fleet transmitted records, testimonies, and detailed legal documentation, representatives of other species began to reconsider long-held beliefs. The nocturne were no longer property, no longer a commodity to be traded or exploited. They were sentient, autonomous beings with rights that must be respected. Viria's relief was visible. She moved with confidence now, no longer crouching or shrinking. Her glowing eyes reflected admiration, curiosity, and a growing sense of belonging. For the first time in her life, she felt safe, not because of restraints, cages, or control, but because of the deliberate courage and principle of another species. Elias guided her through the process of recognition. Together, they reviewed the records, listened to communications, and monitored the galaxy's response. The human approach was meticulous, patient, and thorough. They did not need to threaten or coerce. Their presence, combined with truth and moral authority, was enough. Vieria, observing every step, finally spoke her thoughts aloud. Humans not like others. Protect, care, choose. Yes, Elias said. We are not perfect, but we are capable of extraordinary good. Freedom, trust, and justice are values we uphold, even when inconvenient or dangerous. That is why we survive, and that is why we can protect those who cannot protect themselves. The galaxy slowly began to take notice. Systems that had once dismissed humans as insignificant now hesitated, before attempting to enforce outdated or unjust rules. The story of Elias Ward and Vieria became a quiet legend, demonstrating that humans could act morally, intelligently, and courageously even in the face of overwhelming authority. Vieria's perception of humanity had transformed completely. She realized that the species she had feared, the species that had been responsible for her capture, could also be a source of hope. Elias had shown her patience, protection, and unwavering principle. Through him, she saw the potential of humanity to be a force not of oppression, but of liberation and moral courage. One evening, as they looked out at the stars, Vieria spoke again. Elias, stay, humans true, different, strong. Yes, Elias said, placing a reassuring hand near hers. Humans are capable of great things when we act wisely and bravely, and we choose to act even when it is difficult. That is our greatest strength. Vieria considered this, reflecting on her own experiences. She had endured captivity, fear, and misunderstanding for centuries. Yet here, she had witnessed humans act with integrity, intelligence, and courage in ways that no other species had ever managed. She realized now that she had been given not just protection but understanding and respect, the very things that had been denied to her for so long. You, humans, worthy ally, not pet, she whispered, a soft smile forming on her lips. Yes, Elias said, you are not a pet. You are free. You choose your path. And if you wish, you can stay, learn, and work alongside humans as we continue to face the galaxy together. Vieria's eyes glowed brightly, the fear that had dominated her life now replaced with a sense of purpose and belonging. She moved closer to Elias, not out of obligation but out of choice, understanding, and trust. She had arrived expecting cruelty and captivity. Instead, she found friendship, respect, and freedom. The human response fleet began to withdraw after ensuring that Nocturne freedom was recognized and protected. Galactic authorities, while still slow to adjust, had been forced to acknowledge that humans could not be underestimated. Elias had demonstrated that strength could take the form of patience, intelligence, and moral courage, tools more powerful than weapons in the right hands. Vieria took her first steps beyond mere observation, exploring the station alongside Elias. She learned about human technology, philosophy, and culture. She understood that humanity's power did not lie solely in physical or military strength, but in the capacity to act rightly, think strategically, and protect life. You humans, different galaxy, see strong, she said softly one day, standing beside him as they watched a distant star cluster. Yes, Elias replied, and you have seen it firsthand. You have seen that freedom is worth fighting for, not with violence but with courage, patience, and principle. Over the following weeks, Vieria adjusted fully to her new reality. She no longer recoiled from humans, nor did she fear the universe in the same way. The bond between her and Elias grew stronger, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. She began to contribute actively, using her knowledge and abilities to assist with station operations and communications. She had become more than a rescued alien. She had become an ally, a partner, and a living testament to humanity's principle-driven strength. News of their actions spread quietly but widely. Across distant sectors, other enslaved or misunderstood species began to question authority, inspired by the example of Elias and humanity. The galaxy slowly began to understand that humans were not easily dominated, that they could challenge oppression through intelligence, persistence, and moral courage. Vairia reflected on her journey from fear to trust, from captivity to freedom. She had expected cruelty and confinement, yet she had found protection and respect. Humans had defied expectation, not with violence but with strategy, principle, and steadfast courage. She realized that her life, once defined by fear, was now defined by possibility. "You humans teach hope strong different," she said quietly one evening, her glowing eyes full of wonder. "Yes," Elias said, smiling. "And together we can show the galaxy that courage and morality are powerful, even when the universe expects weakness. We can stand for what is right, even when it is difficult. That is the greatest strength humans possess." Vairia looked at him with a newfound confidence, understanding that her choices were her own. She could leave if she wished, but she chose to stay, not as a captive, not as a companion, but as an equal, an ally, and a partner in shaping a better future. The station, once silent and lonely, was now alive with purpose. Elias and Vairia worked side by side, preparing for future challenges, assisting others in need, and demonstrating through action what humans had always believed: that life, freedom, and trust were worth defending, no matter the risk. As they watched the stars together, Vairia understood fully that humans were unlike any other species she had known. They could inspire, protect, and act with courage and intelligence in ways the galaxy could not predict. Humanity had earned respect, not through domination or fear, but through principle, patience, and unwavering moral action. And Elias, the solitary engineer at the edge of known space, had proven the power of humanity in the most profound way possible. He had saved a life, earned an ally, and reminded the galaxy that humans were a force to be reckoned with, not because of violence, but because of integrity, courage, and the choice to do what is right. Vairia, the once terrified alien vampire woman, had found freedom, trust, and purpose. She chose to stay, not as a pet, but as a partner, an advocate, and a living example of what humans could inspire. Together, they looked at the stars, knowing that the universe was vast, challenges remained, and humanity's reputation was only beginning to be understood. And in that quiet, shining moment, a single undeniable truth became clear: humans were not to be underestimated. They were clever, courageous, and capable of extraordinary good. They could protect life, challenge injustice, and stand unyielding in the face of authority, and they had just begun.